I don't know how my fellow panelists feel, but if you've been here through all the sessions, I personally have felt like everybody who came before us was trying to steal our thunder. Because I felt like Airbnb was being mentioned in just about every other session that I heard. But it is a major issue. It's one that's certainly having an impact, both negative, maybe positive as well, on the Caribbean tourism landscape. And while I'm here as a moderator, I'm also part speaker as well because I wanted to sort of set the stage and give you some a very, very brief background on some of what we're seeing in St. Lucia and how the sharing economy is impacting us. So I got my little tutorial, so there you go, it worked perfectly. So St. Lucia is not somewhere that you usually think of when you think of villas and the sharing economy. It's not the typical destination you think of, but we have seen it grow quite a bit. What's ironic about it is that it's not a new phenomenon, and it's one that our government may even have helped to create and encourage a growth of unwittingly. Because back in 2007 when we were hosting the World Cup, we were asking, we being the government of St. Lucia at the time, was asking owners and providing incentives to owners to expand on their homes, to encourage, to make more accommodations available for the visitors who are going to come in droves, clearly, for the Cricket World Cup. Well, they built it and they didn't come. And fast forward now to 2012, it seems that a lot of these owners, many of whom are St. Lucian, are now able to actually capitalize on that investment finally through Airbnb. In 2012, we had 21% of St. Lucian arrivals actually staying in non-traditional, non-hotel accommodation, villas, private homes, timeshares, even yachts. By 2016, that had grown to 29% of our arrivals. So it's growing significantly in St. Lucia, even St. Lucia, which you don't associate with the sharing economy, by about 10% per year over the last 4 years. The hotel sector, meantime, is only growing by about 1% per year over the last 4 years. And in 2016 in particular, St. Lucia has had a bit of a down year in terms of arrivals. We're flat, up 0.2% as of August 2016. But what's really interesting is that the alternate accommodation arrivals are actually up 11%. So that sector is actually bolstering our numbers because the traditional hotel accommodation arrivals are down 5%. So when you look at these kind of numbers, it's easy to understand why some traditional hotels actually feel threatened and concerned about the rise of the sharing economy. But one thing to note is that the majority of these clients are in fact from the Caribbean, which is really small comfort for small B&Bs and small hotels who rely on that market. But we found that the majority of the persons staying in private accommodation are from Martinique, Dominica, and Guadeloupe, who choose that more than traditional hotels. But we continue to see, in fact, that persons who target the US, Canada, UK, 85 to 90% of guests from that market are still opting for traditional hotels. And that has not changed over the last 4 years, which is interesting. It has changed a little bit for Europe, but the majority of our arrivals from our major markets still stay in traditional hotels. An interesting trend we saw in 2015 was a dramatic increase in expenditure in certain segments of expenditure. The fastest growing segments were independent restaurants, alternate transportation, so not taxis, bus, car rental, and other transportation, as well as groceries. Now, when we try to understand how can independent restaurants go up at the same time as groceries in terms of visitor expenditure, we figured that a big portion of it may have been due to the sharing economy, where you had people who were both self-catering as well as visiting restaurants since they were not on all-inclusive. So it does seem that the sharing economy is changing the expenditure patterns on island, in some cases for the better, and creating opportunities for local entrepreneurs. Now, I think when I was introduced as a hotelier. My family owns the Bay Gardens Resorts properties in Rodney Bay. But in addition to being a hotelier, we are also Airbnb hosts. So Bay Gardens has been on Airbnb for the last 2 to 3 years and has also been on HomeAway and on other platforms. So we took the approach that if we can't beat them, we might as well spy on them. So we've been on Airbnb, and it's not been the biggest source of revenue for us, but it has helped to fill up some need periods when needed, and it's certainly interesting to monitor that platform And we expect that it will start to grow because we do have self-catering accommodation. And in fact, the last one you see, the Bay Gardens Oleander Suites, is actually an apartment that my parents own that they put on Airbnb without me even talking to them. Potential benefits for hotels. There are opportunities, especially for hotels who have their own restaurants and other attractions. In our case, we've seen quite a few persons frequent Splash Island Water Park. We've had 28,000 people use Splash Island since it opened. Quite a few of them, and that was about a year ago, quite a few of these 28,000 people are in fact people staying in villas. We know that because we ask them where they're staying from, and every day we hear about another person staying at another villa that we never heard of who booked on Airbnb. And our restaurants are benefiting as well. So our on-property revenue is higher than it's ever been, partly as a result of that. Switching hats really quickly as I wrap up. Wearing my hat as the president of the SLHGA, it's not our approach to try to push that sector out of existence. I think a lot of people are worried about it, probably wish it wasn't there. But we actually want to embrace these new entrepreneurs and bring them into the fold. But in order to do that, there are just two very simple things that we'd like to see. Some reasonable regulations, not to stifle, but to legitimize and to protect the destination's reputation, and a contribution. Notice I did not use that three-letter T word. Okay, I didn't use that. A contribution, as we like to call it, to the destination's marketing budget. Make out of that what you will, but there is a reality that we need additional funds for marketing, and it certainly could come from that segment. Challenge to hotels. So I was asked for a tweetable, so here is a portion of it. I believe that any small to mid-sized traditional hotel or resort who feels that Airbnb poses not just a bit of competition, but an existential threat to their business, really has to reevaluate their value proposition and ask these questions. People are going towards this platform because they want an authentic Caribbean experience. If you're highlighting that, how you provide that, how you allow people to live like a local, right there within your boutique hotel, you should be able to more than survive because this is a reaction to market demands. And just the very last point, the website booking experience on Airbnb is unbelievable. And we also need to look at our own hotel booking engines and see if we are able to match that seamless experience as well. So without further ado, that was just to give you a brief overview of what we are seeing in St. Lucia and how we're reacting to it. I want to pass it on to Michelle from Interval International. Michelle DuChamp is the Vice President of Business Development of Interval, and she'll give a bit of an overview of another side of the sharing economy, that being timeshare. Thank you. There you go.
Good afternoon. We've made it to the final session. I'm going to talk a little bit about the sharing economy from the timeshare industry perspective, which has a little bit more of a global outlook as opposed to just focusing on the Caribbean. When we look at sharing economy isn't really anything new. But what's changed is technology has really gotten involved to where it has aided in the growth of connecting the people who are looking for broad ranges of products and services in touch with the people who have them. Technology's also helped in the security and using it as a method that becomes more trusted for people as well. So I think it's here to stay, and it's something that's going to continue to evolve. When we look at the timeshare industry specifically and vacationing and the real estate market, the sharing economy has actually been around from our standpoint for half a century. So whether it's had the name fractional, timeshare, shared ownership, no matter what you call it, we've been really in that sharing economy business for a lot of years. It could even be argued that timeshare is an originator of sharing economy. The industry's grown. There's about 6,000 resorts around the world that are in this shared ownership concept where somebody has bought 1 week of time or multiple weeks of time and then ultimately shares in the operational and ongoing management costs of that property. So again, truly being the shared concept. The exchange companies helped that product further evolve by expanding what the vacation opportunities are. Instead of just sharing time with the people that purchased at the same property, they now can share time with other resorts that people purchased interests in through an intermediary such as Interval International or RCI, where from Interval's perspective, we work with 3,000 properties, 185 of which are in the Caribbean market, and ultimately provide exchange opportunities for people to share their vacation time across 1.8 million member families that we work with. So again, it's a concept that's there and works very well for our industry. If further, when we just look at vacationing in general, we've continued to evolve to where now there's also rentals that are offered through that process, whether it's directly from the resort or through the intermediary exchange companies. So when we look at the vacation home market, it's evolved, and I think we're coming full circle with the entrance of the new sharing economy products that are out there that affect vacationing. So we started the vacation home. It was a great investment opportunity. You owned it, but you were also responsible for 100% of the operational costs of that asset. It evolved to fractional ownership, to where you took that same home and the same idea, but you didn't bear the same cost of the ongoing operational and management expense. You shared it with a few other people, to where you were really only using and paying for the time that you were using. Destination clubs got into the business where then they had multiple homes, and you could be a member and have usage rights to go through a club that's sponsored by a company. Then you have the traditional timeshare, which we talked briefly about, where people are just buying a weekly interest at a property and sharing their time and their vacation time and costs with other individuals. And then you have the condo hotel concept, where a portion is run as a hotel and a portion is sold as a whole ownership to individuals that then put the inventory back into a type of rental program that's managed. I think it's interesting to see now with the programs like Airbnb and HomeAways of the world, that vacation home on the far left that you see, that's coming full circle as being something that's important, and there's now new ways to generate income from that asset. I think you're going to continue to see that evolve. And with the entrance of any new thing, the industry has to evolve, and I think that's what you're seeing people do today. So interesting that our panel is mine plus yours equals ours. And from our perspective in our industry, that's absolutely what it is, because you're sharing in that ownership and all the ongoing costs. What I think we're seeing more now is mine is yours for a fee, whether it be Uber, Zipcar, whatever the product is. It's really mine is yours, but you're going to pay me for it. So I would argue that instead of it really being a sharing economy, you're really seeing a new rental economy emerge, especially from the vacation side. It's still an individual owning that asset, but that individual is still bearing the overall operational cost and management of that asset. If they do charge a fee to somebody, that person has no ongoing obligation. They're merely providing income to help support the ownership of that asset from the consumer. So I think it's really kind of a good distinction, and I think you're really looking at new rental is going to happen, and it's happening with all the products and services. You know, you can go online and find anything that you're looking to rent for a portion of time rather than buying it yourself. So the American Resort Development Association's International Foundation did a survey where they asked 1,000 people, what did you like about your most recent short-term peer-to-peer vacation stay or vacation rental? Overwhelming was saving money. Shocking, everybody loves to save money, right? But when you look at other things that they deemed important, it was saving money was the highest. Having a kitchen, being in control. There's that control, you're more in charge. Having multiple rooms, talking to the owner, being able to view the rooms. I thought it was important to show this because I think we can all learn from it and how we need to evolve our business to still be able to keep the market share that we want of renting vacation time if we address these things. We know this is now what is making consumers drive towards that new sharing, new rental economy market that's in the vacation industry aspect. So when we look at the new sharing economy benefits, from our industry, just drilling it really down to the timeshare side, you're giving new choices to people. You're helping them experience different areas different ways, which is great. They're getting to live kind of the daily life, which is good. The timeshares add a different aspect. You have more security, safety. You've got full service amenities at most of the properties. But I think where there's a real link between the two sides of it is that we are exposing millions and millions of consumers to what it's like to vacation in a residential style or condominium style unit or experience. That, from our industry perspective, those people are, I wasn't ready to go back yet. Sorry. Those people are then somebody with that residential experience. They in turn could turn into a lead prospect and a possible tour opportunity for developers in our industry that are trying to sell additional products. So from the concept of what we feel is really a true sharing economy being timeshare, we think there's a lot of room for everyone, and we're interested to see the direction it goes. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. There's actually an interesting article, I think, in the Vacation Industry Review on the sharing economy, an interval publication. So, and it echoed a lot of these, that there's plenty of room for everyone. Our next speaker will be Mr. Jim Hepple. And if I could just get everyone to embarrass him fully by congratulating him and give him a round of applause on winning the Association Executive of the Year. Well done, well deserved. So Dr. Heppel's got a great presentation that I had to see, and he has promised to make sure he disagrees with everything that I had to say. So, come on up, Mr. Dr. Hepple. All right.
Well, actually, what I was going to say is, Sanovnik, you've already given my presentation. That's fine. Well, first, I'd like to thank everyone for being here this afternoon. I know it's been 2 wonderful days, very busy, and I'm very grateful that you're all here. We're all very grateful. What I've been asked to do is briefly, 8 minutes, to give you an overview of the Aruban experience with respect to the sharing economy, and really to focus on the accommodation side of things, because we don't have Uber yet. I had a conversation with Vincent some time ago, and they said until the GPS systems can handle, you go down to the mango tree and then you turn right by the yellow house. That ain't gonna work. So we got a way to go there. We do have private cars, private cabs. What happened there? There we go. Anyway, quickly. We have a category, 3 categories of accommodation in Aruba. Basically the hotels, the timeshare resorts, and what we call other accommodation. And it's a kind of a catch-all: guest houses, apartments, condominiums, private homes. And our inventory, as of this year, we have 23 hotels, all-inclusive and traditional EP, with 5,300 rooms. We have 14 timeshare resorts, because Aruba got into timeshare quite early on and got well established in that area. 3,400 rooms. And we have no clue how many other rooms we have. And I'll touch on that in a minute. 1/3 of our visitors last year used other accommodation. It was 13% in 2010. So you can see how it's grown over the past 5 years. And the numbers, because what would one of my presentations be without numbers? You can see for Aruba, this is very significant. In 2010, we had 822,000 total stopover visitors. Last year, 1.2 million. The number of visitors staying in what we call other accommodation grew from about 107,000. Why is it doing that? Thank you. To over 400,000 of our visitors. I'm not touching anything, believe me. And you can see there was like a 280% growth in that category of accommodation. Hotel visitors grew 10% during that period. And visitors staying in timeshare, 23% growth. So you can see the real growth in our visitor arrival segment came with visitors using other accommodation. Please. What do I do? What? Anyway, hello. If I could have the next slide, please. Now this is now going to go forward about 43 slides now. So. Yeah, thank you, Warren. I haven't lost my sense of hearing, you know. Here we go. 68% of our visitors using this kind of accommodation come from Venezuela. There is a specific set of circumstances with Aruba and Venezuela you need to understand. But you can see the 3 main markets that use this accommodation: the USA. Last year, almost 50,000 of our visitors from the United States used that kind of accommodation. Venezuela, as I've just said, more than 250,000. And the Netherlands has always been a strong user of that kind of accommodation. But there's been increasing use by all markets in terms of using this kind of accommodation. You can see the USA, 6% of our US visitors in 2010. 2015, it went up to 8%. Canada went from 9% to 16%. Venezuela was the big shift. 28% of our visitors from Venezuela in 2010 used other accommodation. It's turned on its head now. Almost 80% use other accommodation. But you can see Colombia was the same, went from 15 to 35. Brazil from 6 to 14. And from Europe as well, we're seeing this increasing use of other accommodation. Netherlands, almost half of our visitors, up to 60% now from Holland. And Germany as well, 27% to 38%. So it's not just a couple of markets, it's just a general trend across the board. Now this is the critical slide. You can see this is percentage growth. The red is basically growth in arrivals, percentage year on year, and the blue is percentage increase in tourism receipts. And you can see we've had some, particularly in 14 and 15, where we had an 8% and then a 14% increase in stopover arrivals, but a substantially slower growth in tourism receipts. So what you've got now is, because of this, average receipts per visitor, per stopover visitor, have been falling since 2012. And this is putting a lot of pressure on the government because they've been proudly announcing these great arrival numbers in terms of visitors, but the local community, the business community, the community as a whole is saying, but we're not seeing the money. We're not seeing the income, and this explains why. Now, these are the kinds of numbers that we have. This is Flipkey, which has about 450 listings for Aruba. HomeAway, about 430 listings for Aruba. AirBnB says more than 300, but we are just talking with the numbers, it's probably closer to 500 listings. Booking.com, 283. And then Expedia, which we always find a little bit difficult to understand because all these are listed as hotels, and I said we have 23 hotels. They list 127 properties as hotels in Aruba. So this is what we're dealing with now. It gives us an idea of what the scope of the inventory is. Now, interestingly, this new trend is popular with, and Sanovnik mentioned it, is popular with local politicians. I've had conversations on a number of occasions with the Prime Minister. Mr. Hepple, why are you opposed to this? Don't you believe in free enterprise? Don't you believe in entrepreneurship? Don't you believe in tourism spreading throughout the community? Yes, sir. And at the same time, we're very close to the police because obviously in all of our destinations, security is a big issue. One of the issues that has arisen because of this growth, particularly over the past 5 years, is that you used to have a sense of tourism was concentrated in certain areas in the community. Now it's everywhere. And when you're talking about a policing plan for security for our visitors, they have had to change their strategies significantly because now with so many visitors throughout the whole community, many who are strangers to that community, they have to change the way in which they're policing, and it's kind of an interesting challenge. Our concerns, as Sanovnik said, we're concerned that many of these property listings which have exploded over the past couple of years, many do not meet proper safety requirements or meet appropriate standards. Many do not have sufficient insurance, and obviously many do not pay room tax. And in some instances, that's not their fault. It's just that the mechanism is not in place to collect that room tax. But we're also finding some new issues that evolved over the past 12 to 18 months. An increasing number of properties are owned by investors, specifically to be used for short-term rentals. One of the issues that we're facing in Aruba is a lot of money has come in over the past few years into condominium development. And these condominiums have been constructed on a business model whereby the investor puts the unit into a rental pool, and then the manager of the condo then rents those condo units out, frequently using the booking channels that we've just been describing. A lot of these investment properties are owned by expatriates or by owners who live overseas. The money for that rental doesn't even come to Aruba. It is exchanged outside of the country. And we're concerned about that because it's giving you a false sense of the economic impact of the visitor. And to Sanovnik's point, we know that they are now competing with what we call our value hotels. Not all of our hotels are on the beach. Not all of our hotels are big brand name properties. There are a number of properties, EP properties, smaller properties away from the beach that have been used, as we say, for those visitors who are looking for a value proposition. They are finding increasingly that they are competing against the units that are offered through the condominiums and competing with the units that are offered through private homes. And they're asking us as a hotel association, what are we going to do to address this competitive situation? And we have an issue with air seats as well. We've talked about, I think that was talked about the other day, in 2010, visitors using other accommodation used 7% of our inbound air seats. Last year, it was 20% of our inbound air seats. The number of air seats is not growing that fast. So clearly, we're seeing some displacement. And also, it's also driving up airfares because of the compression, which puts pressure on the hotels because the visitors are finding that they're having to spend more for the airfare than they did in the past. And as I said, it gives a misleading idea of the number of arrivals relative to the economic impact, which is a very serious political conversation at the moment. Now, we have been working with the government through various mechanisms to address these concerns. And new licensing requirements were mandated on August the 23rd of this year, just over a month ago. Now, the challenge we have with that is that these new licensing requirements were part of a broader piece of legislation to regulate the licensing of all accommodation, which included the regulation of the number of all-inclusive rooms. Now, we had an issue because on the one hand, we are saying we were very opposed to the fact the government wanted to regulate the all-inclusive segment, but we were very supportive of the fact that the government wanted to regulate this other accommodation segment. So they thought that we were a bit schizoid. On the one hand, we say yes to regulation. On the other, we said no to regulation. But there were reasons for that. And unfortunately, we didn't have a particularly constructive dialogue. And the new legislation that has been put in place, unfortunately, is written in such a way is that practically every single private home that is now renting out without a license will immediately become illegal. So we're trying to work out exactly how that's going to impact our business in the short term. Clearly, there's going to be a transition period. However, to conclude with Aruba, clearly it's a trend that's here to stay. A lot of local people have invested in apartments and private homes and that kind of accommodation. They are looking to the tourism board to market on their behalf to generate business. We know that we have to work with the government, we have to work with our colleagues, and consequently it's an issue, as I say, it's not going to go away, and we'll just basically see how it all works out. So thank you.
Thank you, Jim, for that. That was great insight into what's happening in Aruba. Now, we're just going to move right along because we want to make sure we leave enough time for questions. Our next presenter is Martha O'Neill. Martha O'Neill is actually an Airbnb host. So you're going to hear it from the point of view of a host of Airbnb, and I think we should all be very excited to hear that. So welcome, Martha.
Thank you.
There you go.
I don't have anything. No. Hi. My name is Martha O'Neill, and as he said, I'm a host for Airbnb. I started with Airbnb because I had a need and I had a property. 3 years ago, my brother got ill. He was unemployed and had no money coming in. We needed support financial support, and we had this property that has been my parents' house for more than 35 years. So my mom and my dad had moved to my sister's house, and we decided we needed to make some money and put our property in Luquillo on the market. So I have heard about Airbnb and I have seen some things about it, and I decided to go and be a host for Airbnb. And it was a success. We made enough money to help my brother. He continues to be ill, but thank God he has now financial support for disability. After that, me and my husband, we have a farm here in Ceiba, and we built a new house for ourselves, and we asked ourselves, what do we do with our old house? So we decided to put that property in Airbnb too, and it was another success. Right now, a month ago, we just published our third property with Airbnb, and we hope that it's a success as well. Our experience with Airbnb is that people come to Puerto Rico not only to the beach side, but they're enchanted by the countryside. They want to have that experience. We have had people from the States, from Europe, from Aruba, from San Martin, and they all come to know about our rainforest, our people, our hospitality. And I'm very proud to say that I have 30 plus positive, awesome reviews. I am a very proud host, a Puerto Rican, proud to give people from outside the country to see what it is to come to our island. So thank you, Airbnb. I'm not an expert in the business, but I do my best.
Wow. How many more stories are there like that? How many more martyrs are there like that? I think a lot of you were watching intently and even with some emotion listening to that story. So really it helps put the whole thing in perspective, that there are real people behind us, that there are hosts behind us who are providing that authentic experience that people are looking for when they travel to the Caribbean. So well done, Marta. Well done, Airbnb. And that was a very, very fantastic presentation. The next person is Mr. Adnan Jafarov from Roommate, another very interesting new type of property that property chain that he'll explain to you a little bit more about, that have very, very interesting perspective on the shared economy. So I think you'll be very interested to hear this. So Adnan, I'd like to welcome you over to the podium to do your presentation.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. We talking a lot about shared economy. I forgot that I wanted to mention I have just rented a car, so anybody wants to go to San Juan this evening, come see me. We can work something out. Just wanted to say that. As Mr. Sanovnik correctly mentioned, I oversee 2 properties of Roommate hotels in Miami. But as you can see from the slide, I'm going to be talking about the B-Mate. We can call it a sister company or an idea that was born from Roommate hotels. I know we promised to disagree with everything, especially from my side. I'm a hotelier, but unfortunately I'm not going to be disagreeing with everything completely. There are certain things I want to say before starting to talk about B-Mate, just to give an idea what Roommate hotels are. First of all, it's not a hostel system. A lot of people in the United States think Roommate hotels means you're sharing a room with somebody. It's a chain of hotels, a comparatively small one, where right now have about 23 hotels in around 10 countries. But the main thing, I don't want to go in too much into depth about the vision and the culture, but what we always wanted to do is to disrupt the industry, disrupt the hospitality industry. Just to give a few examples, 5-6 years ago when a lot of hotels had short breakfast times, usually finishing at 10:30 or 11, we decided to do breakfast till noon. When up until now, a lot of places have Wi-Fi that they charge for. A few years ago, when we actually were established in 2005, we decided Wi-Fi should be free. And we provide for Wi-Fi everywhere in the city via small portable devices called WeMate, completely complimentary for the guests. We know how roaming charges can be expensive, so we give it to the guests at no charge so they can use Wi-Fi anywhere they go. So this has always been the main vision, to disrupt the industry, to come up with something new, innovative in some ways. And talking about shared economy, and from the story that we just heard, its impact on many lives is non-negotiable. I mean, take Uber for instance. I know in Caribbean it's not so popular, it's not in place. I'm from Miami. In Miami, it gave a lot of opportunities for people who has cars and needed extra income. Even some people who don't have vehicles, now they have this lease program where as little as $250 you can get a car and start making money. So it has a lot of benefits. Speaking about lodging side of shared economy, I think my main point would be that we, the hoteliers, have to think bigger and stop being so conservative about new things that's happening. The way we look at it at roommate hotels is that we have to be innovative. We have to go with the flow, not against the tides. We always like to find enemies. First, it's Expedia and Booking are our enemies. TripAdvisor, for some of us, are enemies. So I say let's stop looking at everybody as our enemies, and as was mentioned before, see what they offer that we do not. And I appreciate the statistics, the survey that reached out to those guests and kind of wanted to get an idea of what did they like the most. And we as a hoteliers have to see what we can offer by maintaining our basics, which hotels and inns and lodging facilities are, welcoming facilities, your home away from home facilities, and try to see what we can do. So we came up with this concept, with this platform in 2014 called BMate. And first of all, roommate hotels are only located in prime cities. When I say prime, I don't want to disrespect any locations compared to others, but we're talking cities like New York, Miami, Madrid, Barcelona, Amsterdam. And we did a brief research because in Spain there was a big debate as everywhere else. The government, the tourism association was panicking that the aliens are here, Airbnb is here, they're stealing the market share, and hotels were going crazy. We did just a brief research. We took one of our hotels in Madrid and wanted to find out, okay, how many properties nearby our hotel are already enrolled in some kind of shared economy concepts or platforms. And that hotel showed a number, and I'm talking 3-4 years ago, around 360 hotels in 1 kilometer vicinity. So they were already here. Go figure. So what are we going to do? Of course, I would call them competitors, as sometimes we don't like to call it competitors, in the sense that basically we are selling the same experience. We're selling bed, a room, a kitchen, and so they are our competitors. I don't want to sound very polite in that sense. So we decided, okay, they're here and they're here to stay. So what are we going to do? Fight, try to deregulate them, ban them, as they do in some cities, place hefty fines on the owners and the association directors? No, we just thought, okay, what is that Airbnb, for instance, in this case, or other lodging platforms offer? They offer the flexibility, they offer the authentic experiences to live with the locals. And of course, in terms of room types, they do offer much more, in most cases, things like kitchen, which was one of the highest survey scores. And we decided, okay, let's combine the best of both worlds. In some cases, just to give an example and not to put any bad image on any shared economy platforms, but a few times I had guests who would come in and say, you know, we rented through an ex-company, we had an apartment, let's say it didn't look the way it was in the pictures. I'm not saying it happens all the time, but I personally did have a few instances. So there was a guarantee aspect of it, safety aspect of it. So we decided to look around our hotels in the cities that we already are and look at the close area vicinity of the location and handpick hotels. When I say handpick, it's usually one of 5 that we pick based on, of course, the location, the convenience of entry and exit, and of course the interior being clean, fresh, nicely designed, and enroll them with our hotels in the concept we call B-Mate. That means the flexibility and independence of renting an apartment with the convenience, safety, guarantees, and services of the hotel. And you go to Amsterdam, for instance. This is the front desk of our hotel, Aitana, in Amsterdam. What it can give you is you will have some complimentary services, such as for the owners, for instance, would be convenient to drop off keys at the front desk for the guests to pick them up at any time. Let's say they have a delay in a flight and sometimes they might come in and not connect with the owners. There can be some inconveniences there. We offer our front desk for that service. Early arrivals, when a guest arrives early and cannot get into the apartment, they can store their bags. They can use any hotel amenities that are available for our guests until their apartment is being prepared. These are some of the complimentary services. Also, one other service is complimentary services is the concierge. We already have them in our hotels. So you came and you wanted to know about the city, attractions and what it has to offer, and our staff will be there ready to assist you with that. On top of that, as you can see, we are offering on-demand services. If you want your fridge to be full when you come in, if you need babysitting services, transportation to and from the airport, that can be purchased at additional charge as well. CityMate. CityMate is a B-Mate employee, and this is where we want to get more accessible and give more flexibility to the guests and to the owners at the same time. It's an employee of a B-Mate who is accessible via mobile device pretty much 24/7. And it is your mate in that city that can answer all your questions, that can give you tips, that can recommend you about the city. And in terms of the owner, if owners is interested about after the guest leaves, if everything is all right with the apartment, and if it is anything that is needed, that CityMate is kind of the connection between the guest, the owner, and the city. And these are some of the pictures we have: apartment in Madrid, Barcelona, Amsterdam, Florence, Miami, New York. So this is basically it. It's a very short presentation, but one thing I want to add, I know that I told that the original idea is to have this platform employed where roommate hotels are, but we are not everywhere, not yet. So we are just developing, and maybe in a year or in 2, we'll come up or want to come up with a platform where we can apply to any independent hotel that wants to be a part of it. Again, that hotel must be in a central location, and and that hotel will be enrolled as a host hotel within the B-Mate program. So we are for the regulations, as everybody discussed. I like the idea of Mr. Sanovnik that at least any taxes that can be put into marketing the destination or giving back to the community, because mostly shared economy, when it was just established, the idea was to give back to the community, and I think it has to be regulated. Hotels get so many regulations, so we do feel sometimes that it is unfair. But again, this is not about going against them. This is just understanding how this concept of shared economy and the hotel industry, the traditional hotel hospitality industry, can work together. And this is our concept, this is our idea. So I'm open for any questions, any ideas, I guess, at the end. So thank you very much.
Excellent. So I told you he had some different views. It's interesting what you said, because I think I showed you Bay Oleander Suites, an apartment that we have near our hotel. We offer something very similar. We just don't call it B-Mate. And I think that that's an opportunity for hoteliers as well to start thinking about, if you happen to own other real estate interests or apartments, that you could integrate that into your hotel and offer the best of both worlds. So last but certainly not least, we have Shawn Sullivan, the policy head for Central America and the Caribbean from Airbnb. I think that this is probably the first time we've had Airbnb physically present at Chief, or, well, last year they were at CHGA. So we're very, very happy to have you here. And we had a good chat just before, and I'm very excited to hear your insights from the Caribbean. Airbnb is also a sponsor of this conference, so I'm very happy to have you here and look forward to hearing from you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I know I'm the one person standing between you all and happy hour, so I will try to be quick. But it is a pleasure to be here. My company, Airbnb, I like to think is slightly different than some of our competitors in that we try to be as kind of forward-leaning, progressive, and transparent, and willing to work with all of you and other stakeholders in the industry. Again, my name is Shawn Sullivan. I'm the public policy lead for Central America and the Caribbean, and what that basically means is I'm the one who negotiates tax agreements. I deal with issues, regulatory issues with governments in the region, regulatory bodies, and other stakeholders. And I'm joined here today by two of my colleagues from Airbnb. For us, I think this is a very good and important starting point to have this conversation. So when I was invited to attend, I was more than happy to come back to Puerto Rico. I think Frank and I are going to start turning this into maybe a monthly road show throughout the Caribbean over the next couple months. So again, I'm happy to be here. I, like many of the people that work for Airbnb, are extremely passionate about our company, the work we do, and the impact that we feel like we are having throughout the world. And I can tell you that the vast majority of our community, our hosts, and our guests feel the same way. We feel that we help create, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of micro-entrepreneurs around the world. We're helping to democratize travel and connect global travelers with local neighborhoods. We enable people to unlock and profit from assets they already own. And in many cases, the money that our hosts earn, they use for medical expenses. They use to pay the rent. They use to keep their lights on. Or they save up so that they can, with their family, also take their annual trip somewhere. Just a little bit about the company, and I'm sure you all already know this, but as I heard mentioned several times yesterday, Uber is the world's largest taxi company, and they own no vehicles. Facebook is the world's largest or most popular media owner, and they produce absolutely no content. And my company is one of the world's largest accommodation providers, and yet we own no real estate or hotels. And I think the point that this underscores is that the sharing economy is here to stay, and it's not going anywhere. I think Airbnb over the coming years will continue to grow and expand into other sectors of the tourism economy. But we've also heard the critics and the criticisms. And while we recognize that we are disrupting the hotel and tourism industry, we do feel like there is a lot that we can learn from you all, and vice versa. And that we can find ways to work together and partner together so that everyone benefits from this. As I said at the outset, one of the things I love about my company is that I feel like we are very progressive and forward-leaning, and we're constantly looking for innovative ways to develop new partnerships and unique opportunities with whoever it may be. Whoever's willing to work with us, we're willing to work with you. Again, Airbnb, we have more than 2 million listings around the world. We're in 34,000 cities, and I believe it's now 191 countries. I believe the only country we're not in at the moment is North Korea. But hopefully that'll change soon. We have listings at every price point. If you cannot afford to stay someplace and you look on our website, you'll probably find something. But if you also want to spend more money, you'll find that on our site as well. This graph just quickly shows you just the tremendous growth that we've seen just in the last 2 years. We consider, we feel like that is obviously going to continue to grow. And we've experienced this growth primarily because the founders of the company stumbled upon it and they filled the consumer demand that was not being met by others at the time. This company, as you all probably know, the history was started by 3 guys in their 20s in their apartment in San Francisco. So it's a great story for our company. What's that? So this chart you're not going to be able to see probably too well, but I'll just go through it quickly. Basically 79% of our travelers, and we get all this information because we do a lot of work with the people that use our site afterwards to have them fill out surveys. But 79% of our travelers want to explore a specific neighborhood. 91% of travelers want to, quote, live like a local. 74% of all Airbnb hosts globally fall outside of the traditional hotel districts. Airbnb guests on average stay 2.1 times longer than typical visitors and spend more than 1.8 times as much. And 42% of guest spending is within the neighborhoods where they stayed, which obviously for us is a good story to tell. Just quickly how we see the Caribbean, we have more than 40,000 listings. You would think since I cover the Caribbean, I would know that specific number. I don't, but I will find it out. But we are seeing significant growth throughout, many of the key countries. Barbados, Aruba, Puerto Rico, and obviously Cuba for us has been a smashing success. We've just passed the 10,000 listing mark since we first started working there earlier this year. So it has been a tremendous success. But the one point I really want to stress is that, we want to work with everyone, all the stakeholders, on a wide range of issues. I think some of those were discussed earlier. But we want to work to increase tourism. We do want to promote common sense laws and regulations. We believe that excessive regulation on the traditional hotel industry is not a good thing. We believe that, we want to work with governments to collect and remit taxes. We're already doing that, obviously, throughout the United States and some key areas around the world. We also want to streamline registration requirements, and we want to make sure that, short-term rental laws do take into account this new sharing economy, and that regulators and politicians do not use it to try to stifle what most people want, what their voters want. And those are all things that we want to work with folks on. I think one of the things that obviously is continually mentioned and I hear a lot of is that, there needs to be more regulations on Airbnb, or at least our hosts. My response to that is that, we're willing to look at it. We're willing to discuss it. I don't think it's realistic to expect to impose the same regulations on a homeowner that you would, the owner of Conquistador Hotel, but it's something that we're willing to discuss and work with governments on. Again, we feel that, the absence of regulation does not necessarily mean that there's an absence of standards. And Airbnb, like many sharing economy companies, like Uber, has a peer-to-peer review mechanism, which we feel is pretty strong and we feel actually works. Over time, hosts who do not provide a good service are not going to last on our website for that long. So anyway, those are all things that we're willing to talk about with folks and governments, and we feel it's an important conversation to have. And then finally, I'll just close by saying that I've been on a couple of these panels in the short time I've been with the company, and I usually get some reporter or somebody tweeting something before I even get off the panel as to whether or not I'm actually staying at an Airbnb, as I got in Barbados a couple of weeks ago. And the answer is yes. My colleagues and I are staying at a place nearby, which is lovely. Anyway, I'm looking forward to all your questions. Thank you. Well, it's a very nice place.
All right, thank you for that, Shawn.